I recently developed an interest in RSLogix Emulate 500. In the past, I've used it a couple times just to try it out to see how it worked. I was always able to get it to function, but it seems like every time I went back and tried it, it didn't seem to work the way it did last time. So I made some excuses for it, but now I've actually got an interest in making it behave more consistently for students. There are schools using our RSLogix 500 MicroLogix lab project manuals, the orange and black set, and they are in class 3 hours a week in a lab, and they have access to the school's computers and MicroLogix 1400 trainers. But for the rest of the week, they don't have access to any hardware. So making the free software available, MicroStarter Lite, which will program the MicroLogix 1000 and 1100. You don't want to use the 1000. It's obsolete, discontinued. The 1100 is still a viable controller, and it has a strong instruction set. Then, of course, RSLogix Lite, which is free, and RSLogix Emulate 500. They're all three free. You can download them, or one of our products, you can order volume 1 of the orange and black with or without the memory stick that has the software on it and other stuff on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a presentation on RSLogix Emulate 500 expressly for the purpose of assisting students who are using the school's hardware and they need to do work at home or on their own on their projects and then bring the projects into the school. 3 hours a week, that's not much continuity. I can forget in 1 or 2 days what I've learned, so I can imagine how much of a struggle it is for them. So let's jump in and look at this software. Thank you. Logix 500 Emulate. What is it? Why use it? And how do we use it? First of all, we are examining this software specifically for students that are using this set of manuals. In Volume 1, you can buy it with or without the memory stick that has the software on it. All the software is free to download from Rockwell Automation. Just go to Rockwell Automation, create an account, it's free, and then search for RSLogix Emulate 500, and you will also find RSLogix Lite and MicroStarter Lite. Otherwise, you can just buy Volume 1 there with the memory stick. I don't advise buying Volume 2 immediately. Just buy Volume 1 and get started and see if you like doing this kind of stuff. No use spending the price for both manuals when you aren't sure if you even like working with PLCs. But this software, Emulate, it covers PLC 5, SLC 500, MicroLogix, so it covers a broad range of controllers. However, we're only concerned about it with the MicroLogix 1100. Now, the ladder logic programming, the free software, MicroStarter Lite, will program 1000 or the 1100. You don't want to use the 1000, stick to the 1100. It's just an emulator anyway. And the 1100 has a much better instruction set and more power. But this was developed for Microsoft Windows. If you have a MacBook or some other operating system, you're going to have to use Windows on it, and you're on your own. You can buy a cheap, used Dell laptop with Windows 10, 7 Pro or 10 for just a little over $100 to do this work. Nonetheless, you're going to run it on Windows. You also need RSLogix communication software, which is free, and then, of course, the ladder logic programming software is free. RSLogix Emulate is a troubleshooting and debugging tool that can emulate the Allen Bradley 1000 and 1100 processors. The platform can do more than that, but we're only interested really in the 1100. And what it does is it cordons off some of the RAM in your personal computer, and then it emulates a PLC controller, programmable logic controller, in that little section of RAM. So it executes the ladder logic programs that are in your offline files, in your RAM or on your hard drive that you open into RAM, updating your program's data tables. It uses the program and data files in the RAM of your computer, not in a physical processor. Okay, first you want to open up RSLogix. This is the first step. You have to configure the driver. Open RSLogix, open an instance of RSWho. This is just so you can see that it's not there. These happen to be the three drivers that I use a lot, mostly the bottom one, but nonetheless, you can see the driver's not in there. We're looking for EMU 500. Click on the double-headed snake, select drivers, and this comes up. Drop down the list, and then go down and select SLC 500 DH45 emulator driver. Make note that it's DH45, which means that it can emulate DH45, Data Highway 45, which has 0 to 31 station, meaning it has 32 station numbers. It is a network that will support 32 nodes. Now we have that driver selected under the available driver types, so we need to do an add new, and when we add new, it's going to come up. Leave the name alone, don't change it, okay. And then it's going to want to know the station number. Well, it comes up by default with 0. Notice it says station number 0 through 31. Make your computer 0. And always remember, everything else has to be something other than 0. So you just pick the default 0. Okay. Close. And now look. Under RSWho, I now show EMU 500. But I don't show any controllers. I just show a workstation, which is the laptop or the computer that I'm working on. And just as any other driver does, if it doesn't see a processor, there's none connected. This driver works the same way. It does not see a controller. In this case, it's not going to be a physical hardware controller. It's going to be something turned on in memory to act like a controller. Now let's open up RSLogix Emulate 500. When you do this, depending on your operating system and how everything's set up, quite often you get this message. Just ignore it. The one thing that people fail to do is just hit OK to see what happens. So you can just ignore it and click on OK. If it annoys you, then right-click on RSLogix Emulate 500, drop down and select More, and then click on Run as Administrator. But you have to do that every single time to avoid that message. I find it easier just to say OK, it goes away, and the emulator works fine. Okay, when a PLC or a SLC, MicroLogix, runs a ladder logic program, first the state of the inputs from the physical real I/O dominate the state of the bits of memory that are identified with those inputs. So a part of the program scan is to go out and take a snapshot of the state of all the screw terminals that are inputs, and then take and put that snapshot in memory in the words that are identified with an I in front of them. File 1, data file 1, I0 dot something something. So the inputs from your real I/O, the screw terminal voltage, high, low, is going to dominate 1, 0 in your memory. Then it's going to execute your ladder logic using the inputs that are stored in those memory locations and other data table values to generate different output values and other data table values. This is the normal scan for a controller. Then the output values in your data table are then going to be translated or sent out to the actual physical outputs. Now notice that we got the emulator turned on. It's established in the RAM of your personal computer, but it has no idea who it is. It's just a section of RAM set aside that will be used for your MicroLogix 1100 program and data files. Consider it a fresh out-of-the-box controller from the factory, but only at the beginning. When you first use it, it's going to come up blank. Once you use it a bit, you may notice that there are files listed in there, and there could be more than one. And any one of them can be run with the emulator. So consider the menu on the emulator. The first icon is the Open folder. This is what you're going to click on to open a saved project file from RSLogix 500 from MicroStarter Lite. So you have to know where this file is located on your computer. In other words, you created a program file and you designated it properties-wise as a MicroLogix 1100 Series B, and then you went to the Communications tab and you put in what node it is. And it's got to have to be 1 or greater. Now you see this one says 2. That's because this is the way this came up when I opened it up. I already have some files in there, but when you're going to do a new file, you need to open, find it, and then it'll appear here. Then the second folder is a reload. I've never used that. I'm assuming that if you're running and you want to reload the file, use this button. And then the third one is close. So if you have projects or programs listed there in the drop-down list you don't want, select one of them that you don't like and hit close and it'll go away. Last but not least is the field where it displays what program it's looking at. And you notice I have 3 in there, and they're in the order that I opened them and named them. And actually there were more than that. So I actually deleted the one that was number 1. So originally this list said test 1 or EMU00 node 1, then test 002 node 3. So if you try to assign a node number to a file when you're going through this process and you've already got one with that number on it, it'll just come up and say it's a duplicate. So if I can go back, give it a different number, 1 through 31. Now this is emulating DH45, Data Highway 485, so there are 32 nodes maximum. Then the rest of the menu, you have a run mode, which runs the program as if it was in a processor. Consider this like the key switch for run program. Then the halt button right next to it, it halts the execution of the program. However, you cannot edit this program in the run or program mode. Even though it's 1100, which supports online programming, you cannot program the code in the emulator. You're going to have to leave the emulator and then either reload or download your changes. That's just one drawback. And then this is cool, 1 rung mode, which runs the program 1 rung at a time. And this allows you to track down errors. So remember, you're using this outside of the classroom, basically, to write code and test it. You can literally run it, and then because there's no I/O, you have to right-click on the inputs and toggle them on, and then right-click, toggle them back off. So, and I did give you code in an earlier video that allows you to create a template where you have some code that does some special things with your inputs to allow you to treat them as a normally open, momentary, normally closed, momentary, or as a selector switch. That way, if it's a push button, you don't have to right-click on and then right-click off. You just right-click on, it goes on for a second, it goes back off on its own. So you can execute your code 1 rung at a time to test it, or you can go 1 step further from 1 rung to 1 program scan. In other words, it'll go through the whole scan and then stop and wait for you to advance. Okay, so you have your emulate driver configured in links. You have your RSLogix program created for an 1100. Now we'll assume that you saved it from a 1400 and then changed the properties of the controller to an 1100 and changed the driver to an EMU 500. You always with the right node number, because remember the node numbers have to match. So those are just a few of the ways that you can get screwed up. And then saved. It's got to be saved. So you open up RSLogix Emulate 500, you click on File, then you click on Open, and now you have to go find your file, the one that you created and saved. Now I just picked on this folder right here that I was playing with, so I found the file and selected it, and then said Open the file, and you're going to get this. If you don't get this, then it's all amiss. Something's wrong. This gives you the opportunity to set your station number. Now, I'm not saying there isn't an instance where this doesn't pop up and everything goes well. Normally this will pop up, notice station number is blank. So when you very first start, you're going to set this to 1. But later on, because you've already got one set to 1, you're going to set it to 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, all the way up to 31. Click on OK. Notice now that in this field up here, we've got that file. At this point, that emulator is looking at that file in your RAM to run. And notice we go back to RSLogix Classic Light, and we look at our EMU 500 driver, and now it's showing you the controller because you just put something in that space. Now it finds something. Before, when it looked, even though the emulator was running, there's nothing there. So technically it wasn't even running because there's nothing to run. The memory was set aside, but a controller did not exist. Now it does. Now you're in business with the emulator and your project. So RSLogix, RSLogix Emulate 500, and RSLogix MicroStarter Lite. That's the third thing you open. You open RSLogix MicroStarter Lite and you go online. So if you just go up and click on comms, system comms, go online, as long as the driver, notice in the orange box there, remote program driver EMU 500-1. And if you look back at the bottom of the first half of the screen where you're clicking on go online, if you look a little to the left, you see EMU 5 for the driver down there. So that means that MicroStarter Lite is already pointing at that driver to go look. So when you say go online, it sees if that driver sees anything. And if it sees something, then it goes online with it. Okay, it uses your computer CPU to scan the rungs in your ladder program. The rungs in your program read inputs and write outputs to the data table stored offline with your RSLogix project. The offline data table is also always active during emulation. So remember before in class and in other videos, I talk about there's the offline project and then the online data files and project files. Program files. Okay, so let's say you're sitting in class and it's getting towards the end of your lab time. You got to leave and go home or go to work, whatever. And you're using the RSLogix 1400. Double click on controller properties and it'll come up. There's your 1400. Select the drop down list and you're going to go down and you're going to pick an 1100 Series B. You can hit apply now or after you do the next step. But it's going to come up and say there is some issue between the 1400 and the 1100. If you convert, you may lose some data and or I/O configuration. Don't worry about that. Okay? The 1400 you're working with has no external added I/O. It's all going to work out fine. So hit OK. Then you go up and select the controller communications before you're done with this. You select controller communications and you see that the driver that was last used by my software was the Ethernet IP driver. So you drop down the list. There's the emulate driver, and of course that won't show up if you don't have it configured in RSLogix. Select it, and it's going to ask you, it won't ask you, but it's there for you to change. Now notice this is set at 0, processor node. It can't be 0 because the computer is 0, therefore the emulator in the RAM of your computer, the computer is 0, but the processor you're going to emulate can't be 0. So early on, you just make it 1, and then later on, you might have to make it 2 or so forth. But make sure that's 1. So your controller properties, RSLogix 1100, driver EMU, and a node number greater than 1. Click OK. Now select comms. Now this may not bear the result that you want, so just hang in there a minute. There's 2 ways to do this. You select comms, system comms, and then it opens up kind of a RSWho looking thing, and there's your driver. Notice that it saw your 1100 before and it doesn't see it now. Not to worry. If you see this, Then what you're going to do is cancel, and you're going to go select the drop-down arrow next to the online toolbar, and then go down and select download. Select OK. I never put any revision notes in here. I just click OK, and now it's going to download the program. Okay, at this point, it's going to behave just like any other screen capture or what you see on a computer screen when you're downloading to a controller. It'll show you a progress bar, and then you'll go online probably in the remote program mode. So from here on out, it's just normal. Okay, there you are, remote program. So you can change this to remote run. You just click on the drop-down arrow and select run, and then there'll be a verification. You click OK or yes, and off you go to the races. Now, the Emulate 500 does not support all the instructions in all of the Slick 500s and RSLogix. So here are some of the instructions that it does not support. And I'm not going to go down through and read text on a PowerPoint to you. You can always go back to this screen, or you can click on, you can go to Rockwell Automation, and you can type in RSLogix Emulate 500 in the document section, and you can find your way to knowledge bases that give you the list of program instruction exceptions for RSLogix Emulate 500. But this is the first batch. Now the first couple there, block transfer, read writes, and then you've got things to do with interrupts, I/O interrupts. Well, there is no I/O. You just have the RAM that a controller would have, but you've got no I/O update, input or outputs. So obviously none of those instructions are going to work. So, and then the message instruction, you might be able to use it with Slick 500s if you're emulating a Slick 500, but in order to do that, you need RSLogix 500 proper. Very expensive software. So no PIDs, and if you look down through here, like the PTO and the PWM, those two don't have those instructions. In other words, there are no outputs, the instruction is not executed. And then the last one is the data logging. Now, I put the link in here, but then I realized you can't click on this. So I don't know if you can type this in. Probably not. You're going to have to go to Rockwell Automation and get into their knowledge base and find it. Okay, so here I've got RSLogix Emulate 500 open. I drop down the list and notice that there are 3 there. So now I'm going to open up 3 instances of MicroStarter Lite. There's one, and notice that that's ML1400 cylinder 4 _ page 141 in volume 1 of your lab project manual. That's the project that you were working on around page 141. Then I can also open up another instance, simultaneous, of the emulator, and then I go pick ML11 machine sequence 23, page 288 of the volume 2. Then I can go back and pick yet another one. So I'm opening 3 instances of MicroStarter Lite, and these are all running simultaneously on my laptop right now. I use screen captures just to make it look a little bit neater. So I could have just grabbed a screen capture right off of my... Okay, here I have Emulate 500 open, and I want to run a project. So I just happen to have this one came up in the queue. Remember, I told you you can pick one, then you can go over here and close file and get rid of these. So this is the one I want, though. So now I'm going to go get RSLogix 500 or MicroStarter, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to try, I always say try what you want it to do, and most of the time it works. So I'm going to go comms, and I see 1 there. Now remember, I had 4 of them in there. Notice that it's 1, 2, 3, and 5. So that means at some point, whatever was 4, I closed the file on that. So I'm going to go pick this one, and I'm going to say online, and that's going to come up, and because remember, I didn't have this project opened. So I can go create a new file, but instead I'm going to cancel, and I'm going to go find ML11 machine sequence, open it up, and then go online. Right there. That way I've got the text and everything. So now I'm going to say, I could say who active, go online. I could go over here and say go online. Well, we'll do it here just for grins. See, now I'm online in the emulator. Okay? Put it in the run mode, and it's behaving as you would expect. And this particular program is the largest project in both of those two manuals, the orange and black. So this is, you could call this the final class project. And we'll just maximize this up. And then, of course, you go to Window, Arrange, Default Project, and there you have it. And I'm going to geyser this up to make it easier to look at. Now, if you haven't gotten this far in the manuals yet, don't worry about it. I'm just demonstrating that the single biggest project in all those manuals, you can run it effectively in here. And I don't even have the software in this, the template, to make normally open and normally close inputs emulated. In other words, I'm toggling it on. So I happen to know that if I toggle on photo I1, the system sees a part coming down the conveyor. It triggers the barcode scanner. And the next thing I have to, it's momentary. So you toggle that off. And then you go down here, and now what it's going to look for, well, I boogered that up. I'll do that again. Toggle bit. The next thing is photo I2. I'm going to toggle that on and back off. And then up here, you can see the logic is going through and updating things. You can see things going on and off, retract cylinder 4, boring completed, and so forth. So this runs perfectly fine. This is the biggest project. And if you add the logic so when you toggle something, it goes back off if you've configured it as a momentary contact. So there it is, folks. Works good, lasts a long time. Enjoy.